Hi, Grandma here, and I'm reading Mr. Lincoln's Drummer, and we're beginning chapter 3. In chapter 2, Will's father decided to join the Union Army, and Will has joined with him. The mom felt overwhelmed when Dad was going to join. That she had 3 sons to take care of, and now she's kind of thinking, well, maybe they'll take care of one another. Chapter 3. We were whole days on one train after another heading south. I lost track of time and distance. After a while, I didn't even know where we were. The small stove the conductor lit to hit the car couldn't hold off the gnawing cold, and I wished I'd brought along 1 or 2 of Ma's quilts. Move over some, Pa suggested. I slid over, and he wrapped his big arm around my shoulders. A little later, a lady passenger offered us a wool blanket. I'm sort of old for this, don't you think? I asked Pa when he tucked the blanket under my chin. Well, I'm not so sure, he replied. I guess you think that since you decided to be a soldier, you can't be my boy anymore. Oh, it's not that, Pa, I told him. I'm glad you came along. Came along? As I recalled, I joined first. I mean, that we'll be together. Maybe I won't make so many mistakes that way. I don't want the others to think I'm still a child, though. Well, I'm not wiping your nose, Willie, Pa pointed out. Anyway, those other fellows are doing the same thing. I just thought maybe you'd feel a hair more comfortable knowing who is next to you. I know I do, son. He gave me one of those half grins of his, and I laughed. Glancing behind me, I saw Captain Harrington sandwiched between a couple of fellows from Linden. He appeared more than a little ill at ease. The cold got worse each night. Neither Pa nor the blanket kept my toes from freezing and once the sun went down. There were cracks in the sides of the car, and not all the windows fit their frames. I judged some glaciers were never as cold as that car, and I found myself wishing us south. I read once that it never snowed there, and the notion alone was enough to hurry us to Richmond. We eventually arrived at Washington. It was snowing there too, and I wasn't the only one to notice. I hope they found us a good hotel, Pa said. Hotel? Captain Harrington cried. You are recruits. You will be lucky to find a tent. Now get to your feet, the captain barked. Beat assembly, drummer. His words carried an edge now, and I gazed at him in surprise. There wasn't a hint of the old relaxed Captain Harrington. I yawned, drew out my sticks, and tapped out the call. Pa and the other recruits stumbled to their feet, took what few possessions they had brought with them, and followed the captain out of the car and onto the wooden plank of the platform of the depot. We'll soon be at Camp Griffin, Captain Harrington explained. You might as well start behaving like soldiers. You don't look like soldiers, I know, but once we have you properly outfitted and trained, you will. Myself, I thought the others appeared presentable enough. Compared with some of the soldiers lounging around the depot or on the streets beyond, our little band was military perfection. As a whole, the men were close to 6 feet tall, and hard work had honed each muscle. Me, I was the runt of the lot, being the youngest and a drummer too. Even so, some of the soldiers we passed weren't too much taller. The Army had a general or two who didn't stand 5 feet 6. I read about that in Harper's Weekly. We joined the 3rd Vermont at Camp Griffin, one of the countless sprawling cities of tents that covered the heights overlooking the Potomac River. Our first stop was a regimental surgeon's tent. He ordered us inside one at a time, starting with Pa. I went last. I confess the whole business made me a little nervous. Each man walked into the tent and disappeared. When my turn came, I picked up the drum and stepped inside. A sober-faced man in a white coat eyed me sourly and ordered me to set the drum beside the door. You the last? He asked. Yes, sir, I replied, trying to stiffen my back and stretch myself taller. Does your mother know you're here? Yes, sir, I replied. Pa's here too. I gazed around at the tent. A cabinet full of pill jars lined one wall, and there were stacks of papers everywhere. A second door on the far end explained the mysterious disappearance of all the others. "You must be Johnston, Willie," the doctor said, gazing hard into my eyes. "Blue eyes, fair hair. Any lingering disease, amputations?" "No, sir," I said, showing him my fingers. "I still have both ears also, although Mom lengthened the right one an inch or so." "She has, huh?" It was from her pulling on it to get him to behave. "She has so?" he asked, laughing as he scribbled something in his notebook. "All right, strip." "Sir?" "Peel your clothes, boy. You don't expect me to examine you through a wool jacket, do you?" I hesitated, but he placed his hands on his hips and grunted. I pulled off my shoes, pants, jacket, and shirt. "Everything," he muttered impatiently. "Everything?" I gasped. "Son, I don't expect you to have webbed feet or a tail, but the Army expects me to make sure anyway." I frowned. I shared an attic with two brothers, and in the summer I swam buff naked with friends outside town. Still, I wasn't too eager to bare myself in front of a stranger. "I hate to hurry you, Willie, but the sooner we get finished, the sooner you can get some clothes back on," he whispered. "Trust Doc Jones, won't you?" He rested a hand on my shoulder. I shook off the worst of my embarrassment. Finally, I stepped out of my drawers. "Height," he muttered. Before I could reply, he backed me against an upright wooden plank, straightened my head, and made a mark on the board with a pencil. 4 feet 10 inches, he said, "and a half, maybe," he added, reading my disappointment. "Boots will make you taller, of course." "Of course," I agreed. He pointed to a set of scales. I hopped across the cold ground and stepped up, and he shifted some weights until a bar balanced. 84 pounds, Doc Jones observed. "They must have starved you on that train to get you so skinny. You be sure to come by the officers' mess every day or so. I'll save you something. I don't believe there's a man in this regiment who can cook." "I can fry an egg," I boasted, "and boil potatoes." "Well, we don't get too many of either," he said, poking my side. "Ever had a fit?" "No, sir." "Do your bowels move freely?" I nodded. He tapped my knees, examined my elbows, and took a good look at my toes. "Anything wrong?" I asked as he scribbled notes in his book. "No, sir, you got all your parts. Some of them could do with scrubbing, and I wish you had a little more meat on you." "Pa always says it's the hungry wren that will dig deepest for a worm," I declared. "I believe you'll do, Willie Johnston," the doctor said. "Grab your clothes and slip through the door there to the quartermaster. He'll get you properly outfitted." "Yes, sir," I said, slipping into my drawers, grabbing my clothes, and hurrying toward the back door. I didn't have half the trouble with Dr. Jones that I had with the quartermaster. He was a big, round-faced man who joked about my size and laughed at the goosebumps spreading across my nearly frozen back. He finally tossed some stockings, 10 sizes too big. The uniform pants would have fit Pa, and the tunic stretched down to my ankles. "Don't you have anything else?" I asked. "Questioning my authority, boy?" he barked. "No," I replied, "just your eyesight." The quartermaster got all red and puffed up, and he was about to march out from behind the counter when Captain Harrington came in. "Sergeant, what's this?" the captain asked, taking the tunic from my trembling hands. "He can't wear this. He needs to use his hands. Find him a smaller size." "Yes, sir," the quartermaster said, scrambling around. In short order, he located a uniform that was still big, but I could hem the pants legs myself and shorten the sleeves. Suspenders would take care of the rest. I got myself dressed, collected my discarded clothes, and followed the captain outside. Calvin Stebbins was waiting there with a grin on his face. My drum rested beside his feet. "Cal," I asked. "Drummer Johnston. I'm detailed to guide you to Company D," Cal told me. "Where's Pa?" I asked Captain Harrington. "He'll serve with Company B," the captain explained. "I'm sorry, sir, but they already had a drummer. Company D needs one." "But," I began. You know a lot of the boys, Willie, Cal whispered. Lots of them, it's youngsters like us. It's mostly old gray beards in Company B. Johnston, the captain said, turning me toward the smaller tents of the soldier camps. You might as well know that a soldier follows orders. You go where you're needed. It might ease your concerns, though, to know that I am the commander of Company D. I stared at him, nodded slightly, and left with Cal. It didn't make me feel a bit better. The captain knew that Pa expected me to serve with him. I had a sour taste in my mouth about that train trip, and now I had a battle just getting a uniform that would fit. The only kind words I've heard since joining the regiment had come from Doc Jones, and they were pitiful small compensation for treating me like a prize hog on market day. Things improved some once Cal led me to his tent. Not him, Orlando Stevens complained when I slipped through the flat and faced my tentmates. Welcome to Camp Griffin, Willie, his younger brother Russell said, gripping my frozen hand. Get this boy closer to the stove, brothers. He's cold as ice. I heard the Cap growl at that quartermaster about keeping him waiting on a uniform. Cal muttered as he buttoned the flap. I'd introduce you around, Willie, but I think you know about everybody. In truth, I did. Besides Russ and Orlando, Calvin Stevens was there too. Stevens brothers were all about 5'7" or 8, and they had similar features. Calvin, who everybody called Blackie because of his dark hair, was the middle one. Lando, at 20, was the oldest. He had sandy brown hair and sported the beginnings of a mustache. Russ was 18, and he had gray, serious eyes. He reminded me of my brother James. Moses Torrance, a 17-year-old from Melbourne. Horace Partlow, a 19-year-old from the little town of Holland. And Salome Persons, an old man of 20 from Morgan, also called the conical tent home. There are times when 8 bodies are a nuisance, Cal observed, but never on a cold night. We do have to explain about Spoke sleeping. What? I asked. Each fellow puts his head toward the stove and his feet to the wall. That way everybody gets some of the warmth. I'll warn you, tent sleeping takes some getting used to, particularly the smell. But you ought to have a look at some of the other camps if you think we're having a hard time. There are outfits sleeping in wedge tents. They have to sleep spoon style. That's where one person's head is here and their feet are here, and next to them is somebody's head and their feet are there. That means in spoon style, somebody's always smelling one another's feet. Spoon style, I asked, scratching my head. That anything like Spoke style? No, Cal said, shuddering. In a wedge tent, the first man put his head towards the door. The next puts his feet. There are 6 men in those tents, and each one has his nose at his tent master's feet. That's a pleasant thought now, isn't it? The real fun comes when somebody needs to turn, Lando said, shaking his head. Everybody has to do it at the same time, or you have yourself some serious accidents. There's a price to all this high living, Lando observed. Our stove has an appetite for wood. So whenever we're not drilling or doing picket duty, we're out gathering and chopping logs. You'll take your turn too, Willie. I expect to do my share, I replied. Now, who's hungry? Lando asked. I am, I shouted, and the others cried out their agreement. I then had a chance to learn the real merit of having a stove in your tent. Besides keeping us warm, it allowed us a chance to cook our own rations. We're issued bread, salted beef or pork, beans, and even vegetables sometimes, Cal explained as Moses dragged over a ration box. He's a real genius, Russ said, nodding at Moses. I like to cook, Moses said, taking a slab of bacon from the box. It's a challenge considering what they gave us, but we do all right. We'd better serve Willie a double share, Lando suggested. You could fit 2 of him in those trousers. Oh, I'll fix that directly, I said, sliding the suspenders off my shoulders and pulling off my uniform trousers. Then I took a small sewing kit from the pocket of my civilian trousers and began studying the best way of shortening the waist. Oh, I forgot your pa's a tailor, Lando said. You'll be some help to the rest of us. I don't think any of these new pants fit proper. I noticed the new uniforms, I said, scratching my ear. When you left St. J, you wore gray. Well, that wasn't too convenient as things turned out, Lando explained. Some of the regiments wore gray at Bull Run, and our own men mistook them for rebels. We got directed to make the change. Some got to keep their old clothes and dye them blue. We 7 all got new Union Army issued. Considering the quality, I suspect somebody's making a fine profit off these uniforms, Willie. I never got anything from your pa so poorly made. I examined the fabric. It was pitifully thin, and the stitching was uneven. Looks like I'll keep busy mending, I told them. While I worked on my new trousers, Moses transformed odds and ends from the ration box into a regular feast. He was a magician. Our dinner looked truly inviting, and it tasted even better. You can thank Cal for the vegetables, Russ explained as I handed Moses my empty plate. Yeah, he's got a talent for discovering vegetables, Moses added. He goes out on water details, and he brings back a full bucket in one hand and a flour sack filled with carrots or greens in the other. He even discovered an apple pie one day. Farmers hereabouts aren't any too happy, Lando said, laughing. Colonel Hyde tells him he can't find any evidence, though. There isn't any, Russ noted. We eat every crumb. After eating, I helped Russ scrape the plates and clean up. Then our corporal, George Washington Washburn, brought over the rest of my equipment. Don't worry about the other gear, Cal advised, stowing it beside the door. It's these blankets you need tonight. Fetch the rubber one, Lando told Cal. Now watch close, Willie. We can't do this for you every night. I watched carefully as Lando and Cal rolled the rubber blanket out onto the hard ground. This goes down first. It will keep the wet out, most of it anyway. We're lucky not to be camped in a swamp. Some of the companies have water in their tents. When we first got here, we spread out grass and leaves, Lando said, pointing to the residue beneath our feet. If we ever get some decent weather, we'll cut some more grass and add a layer. That warms things considerably. Anyway, you have 3 blankets, Willie, Cal noted. Keep 2 below and 1 on top. That may seem odd, but trust us, it's a lot colder underneath than it will be on top. Thanks, I told them. You ever need a favor to return? Just ask. Oh, you'll earn your way, Moses insisted. Each of us does. Sure, Cal agreed. Wait until the weather breaks and we get visitors. You won't even have to discover anything. Ladies from Washington and Georgetown come out here with baskets of fruit, pies, cakes, you name it. They always have some treats for the child soldiers. I'm no child, I insisted. Well, you're no hairy-lipped sour apple of a captain either, Lando insisted. Act little when we get visitors, Cal advised. One young fella in Company E got himself a new coat from a young lady, a real warm one, too. The coat or the lady? I asked. Both the way I heard it, Lando cackled. Never turn down a kindness, Willie, Russ whispered. A little later, when we took to our blankets, you wait and see if there isn't enough hardship. Once the snow melt and we get back to drilling all the time, you'll get so you welcome a fever for the rest it earns you. I saw the truth of the words in his eyes, and I took it to heart. What he meant by that is when you're drilling, a fever gets you bed rest, and he'll appreciate that. Well, That was interesting. What did you think was most interesting? I never thought about how you sleep in a tent and, and like a spoke with their heads in toward and their feet out here, and they're sleeping in a circle around the stove. I thought that was very interesting. What did you think was interesting? I didn't realize the trains were so cold, but I guess they would be without heat. Anyway, see you next time. Bye-bye.